On a quietly peaceful night, a gentle breeze whispered ancient secrets through the river valley's trees. Stars shone brightly, observing every earthly movement, the full moon lighting the path for nightwalkers. In this serene setting, a profound mystery was about to be unveiled, reaching back to humanity's origins, to a forgotten past where extraordinary beings lived among us. Imagine yourself amidst that magical landscape, feeling the cool night air. The damp earth scent, mingled with moonlit flowers, created an enchanting fragrance. Soft, inviting grass beneath your feet, and a distant stream murmuring ancient tales. It's an invitation to reflect, a pause to delve into the depths of the unknown. Now, imagine asking what truly happened when Nephilim walked the ancient earth. What hidden secrets lie buried in forgotten ruins? Stories speak of giants who walked among men, beings of immense stature and strength, who, some texts claim, were not merely human. They were known as the sons of God, the Bene Elohim, who descended to earth and united with the daughters of men. Genesis 6:1-4 mentions these beings, describing them as immense figures, the Nephilim, not just legend, but a reality many ignore. Some scholars assert these giants were responsible for great feats, shaping civilization's trajectory. Yet, why was this story relegated to silence, this topic avoided in everyday conversation? A profound mystery envelops these beings, an institutional silence spanning generations. As we observe the stars, we might ask, is humanity's history more complex than taught? Are there indications Nephilim were real? Evidence is scattered worldwide. In ancient temples, various cultural accounts speak of powerful beings, of gods who descended. What happened to them? Were they merely a distorted memory, or did they truly leave their mark on history? Each new archaeological discovery raises more questions. Were Egypt's pyramids majestic, logic-defying monuments, built by human hands or by beings with knowledge beyond our current grasp? The precision of great megalithic structures, like Baalbek's, raises intriguing questions. How could ancient peoples, lacking modern tools, create such grandiose works? What if Nephilim not only existed but dominated Earth? This fascinating idea leads to deeper reflection on knowledge and civilization. What can we learn? Like enduring ruins, our own narratives may carry hidden truths. Like enduring ruins, our own narratives may carry hidden truths. What can we learn from these stories? Just as the ruins endure, resisting the passage of time, our own narratives may also carry hidden truths. As you breathe slowly, allowing the tranquility of the night to envelop you, ponder how these mythical figures might have influenced humanity's narrative. Ancient texts speak of a pact of forbidden knowledge that was passed on to these beings. The Book of Enoch, which recounts the fall of the Watchers, describes how these beings taught humans skills that altered the course of history. Metallurgy, enchantments, astrology, all of this was the legacy of an era when the magical and the physical coexisted. In this moment of reflection, I invite you to allow yourself to travel through time. Imagine yourself on Mount Hermon, where the Watchers supposedly descended, where sky blended with earth in a dance of divinity and mortality. What would you feel being there, beneath the shadow of the ancients, where stories intertwine with reality? The air temperature would shift, and the weight of history could be felt in every breath. You could almost hear the echoes of laughter and murmurs from a time when gods walked among men. And so, as you get lost in this journey, the question persists. Were the Nephilim merely a legend, or are there hidden truths yearning to be discovered? The answer might be closer than we imagine, in the shadows of history and in the marks left by those who came before us. The past is a vast field of exploration, and every step we take towards it brings new possibilities and new questions. As night advances and the sounds of nature grow softer, allow the mystery of the Nephilim to permeate your mind. The search for forgotten truths is a journey that never ends. Throughout this night, we will be guided by these questions, and as we delve deeper into history, we may uncover the secrets that have been hidden from us. May this be an invitation to a new way of seeing the world, where what is believed to be impossible can become a new truth. The journey of the Nephilim is just beginning, and as you relax, immersing yourself in the depths of this narrative, remember that every story carries within it a piece of truth, waiting to be revealed. Let curiosity lead you to new horizons, as the stars continue to shine, silent watchers of a past that can still be unveiled. As you observe the soft moonlight reflecting on the leaves of the trees, you can feel curiosity growing within you. The mystery of the Nephilim, the children of the gods, still echoes through generations. Why were their stories overshadowed, relegated to the back of shelves and libraries? This almost deafening silence seems to conceal truths many prefer not to confront. What if these extraordinary beings truly existed? And what if their influences still permeate the reality we live in today? The night breeze brings a slight tremor, almost as if nature itself were whispering secrets about what truly happened in Eden, the birthplace of humanity. Ancient texts like the Book of Enoch offer an intriguing narrative about the Nephilim, describing them as beings of great power and knowledge. These watchers, who descended upon Mount Hermon, brought with them abilities that defied human comprehension. They taught men about metallurgy, enchantments, astrology, and other sciences which, in the wrong hands, could be as dangerous as they were fascinating. Beings that defied human comprehension. They taught men about metallurgy, enchantments, astrology, and other sciences that, in improper hands, could be as dangerous as they were fascinating. Imagine for a moment what it would be like to live in a world where the Nephilim were real. The earth would be filled with wonders and dangers, where knowledge and power coexisted in a delicate balance. It would be an era of splendor, but also of conflict. The giants could have been seen as both protectors and tyrants. Their extraordinary abilities might have shaped architecture and agriculture, leading humanity to a new level of evolution. But at the same time, they could have introduced corruption and violence, as their actions influenced developing societies. When speaking of the Nephilim, it's impossible not to mention the flood, a cataclysmic event that, according to many accounts, aimed to cleanse the earth of the corruption humanity had accumulated. Genesis presents us with the image of a God wishing to purify his people, a judgment upon the wickedness that had spread like a plague. However, the account suggests that the Nephilim's influence still persisted, even after this great catastrophe. The phrase, "and also after," resonates as a warning echo, insinuating that the lineage of these beings might have survived, imbuing the world with their characteristics even after the flood. At this moment, the night seems to intensify. The sound of the distant stream becomes more pronounced, as if it has been trying to tell us this story for ages. The wind, passing through the trees, carries the weight of untold secrets. You can almost feel the presence of these beings, as if they were shadows dancing at the edges of your imagination. What would you do if you had the chance to encounter one of them? What would you ask? The answers could change everything. The marks left by these giants on ancient civilizations are an essential part of the discussion. In Baalbek, Lebanon, the enormous stones that make up the ancient temples still defy current understanding. How could these stones, some weighing over 1,000 tons, have been transported and positioned with such precision? Modern engineering still struggles to replicate such a feat. Could it be possible that the Nephilim, with their superhuman stature and strength, contributed to these monumental constructions? Or are these structures the result of a lost civilization, which possessed advanced knowledge that we cannot comprehend today? As these thoughts echo in your mind, you realize that each question brings with it a new layer of mystery. What do we truly know about the history of humanity? Are the narratives passed down to us sufficient, or is there more to discover? The surrounding silence seems to deepen these questions, inviting you to delve even further into the depths of these reflections. What connects all these stories is the search for truth. In many cultures, there are accounts of beings who came from the sky, of deities who interacted with humans. The Nephilim, if they truly existed, represent a fascinating intersection between the divine and the human. This connection leads us to question the very nature of humanity. What does it mean to be human? Are we mere passengers in this world, or is there a greater structure that links us to something transcendent? When the Nephilim were mentioned in ancient scriptures, the narrative that followed spoke of destruction and rebirth. The history of humanity is filled with cycles of rise and fall, of building and destruction. What then prevents us from revisiting these stories in a new light?
The truth about the Nephilim may not be just about them, but about ourselves and what makes us human. With the moon now higher in the sky, you allow yourself to contemplate what these ancient beings might teach us. It is a reflection on power, responsibility, and the thin line between enlightenment and darkness. With each breath, you feel the weight of the stories that preceded us, stories that, though distant, still resonate in our present. The connection to what was can guide us in unexpected directions, revealing truths that, for a long time, lay hidden beneath the surface of reality. In this moment, as night advances, you realize that the journey in search of answers has only just begun. The secrets of the Nephilim, the truth about Eden, and the lessons we can glean from a forgotten past are waiting to be discovered. And as you surrender to this quest, you feel a profound calm taking hold of you. The truth, even the most forbidden, can offer us not only enlightenment but also a renewed sense of purpose and understanding. Thus, as the moonlight shines brightly, you allow yourself to relax, knowing that the search for truth is never in vain. History continues to unfold, and you are here to explore it, a curious traveler on a journey that transcends time and space. With each breath, you draw closer to the essence of what it means to exist among the mysteries of the universe, intertwining with the echoes of a past that still shapes us. As we observe the starry sky, it's hard not to wonder about the answers that lie beyond our understanding. The story of the Nephilim is one of those questions that provokes both curiosity and apprehension. They were not merely mythological figures, but, according to some interpretations, beings from a distant past who influenced humanity in ways we still don't fully comprehend. Many questions remain unanswered. Who were the Nephilim truly? Why did they emerge? And, most importantly, what happened to them? To understand this narrative, we need to go back in time and explore the origins of Earth, a place where the lines between the human and the divine were thinner than we can imagine. The Bible offers us a glimpse, but texts from other cultures, like the Sumerians, also help us trace a timeline spanning millennia. The Book of Enoch, for instance, details the story of the Watchers, the angels who descended to earth and united with the daughters of men, generating a race of giants. If this story is true, what does it imply about the nature of divinity and humanity? The Nephilim were described as giants, but more than that, they were considered powerful and feared. Legends recount that these beings possessed abilities that defied human comprehension, and their actions often resulted in chaos and destruction. The cities they built, the civilizations they helped erect, all of this echoes in the ruins we still find. Megalithic monuments, such as those in Baalbek, Lebanon, offer us a window into this distant past. And the civilizations they helped to erect, all of this echoes in the ruins we still find. Megalithic monuments, such as those at Baalbek in Lebanon, offer us a window into this distant past. Baalbek is a fascinating place, not only for its grandeur, but for the mystery that surrounds it. The stones that compose its temples are so immense they defy contemporary logic. How did primitive human beings manage to move and carve blocks weighing hundreds of tons? Most archaeologists attribute these feats to collective human labor and construction techniques that, while impressive, remain debated. But if we consider the possibility that the Nephilim or other otherworldly beings played a role in this process, the story becomes even more intriguing.
Imagine the heat of the sun beating down on the ancient rocks as you walk among them. The sound of the wind through the columns is like a symphony of the past, a song of forgotten eras. The rough texture of the stones beneath your fingers is a tangible reminder of the raw force employed in their construction. What have these stones witnessed? What stories are hidden on their time-worn surfaces? In the narrative of Genesis, we find reference to a union between the sons of God and the daughters of men, an act that, according to the text, was one of the reasons for corruption on earth. The idea that these entities, by nature divine, united with humans provokes a series of reflections on what it means to be human and what it means to be divine. This intersection of worlds produced the Nephilim, a race that, according to the scriptures, brought violence and impiety. How does this relate to our understanding of morality and ethics? Does the influence of the Nephilim still resonate in our modern world? Another fascinating narrative is that of the Book of Enoch, which describes the 200 watchers who descended upon Mount Hermon. These beings made a pact under a curse, sharing forbidden knowledge with humanity. This exchange of knowledge, which included metallurgy, sorcery, and even enchantments, had a profound impact on the development of civilizations. What can we learn about ourselves from this exchange? Is the pursuit of knowledge a blessing or a curse? The ruins of Mount Hermon, with their imposing stones and vestiges of ancient structures, invite us to reflect on what truly happened there. The majestic summit, which rises to 2,814 meters, is a sacred place, not only for the traditions that venerate it, but also for those who seek to understand the past. What can the mountains teach us about the nature of humanity and about our own impulses? As we delve deeper into this mystery, we find connections with other cultures, such as the Sumerian tablets, which speak of the Anunnaki, beings who also descended to Earth and interacted with humanity. These stories, though different in their narratives, present an intriguing similarity: beings from other dimensions or realities who influenced human growth. Could there be a global pattern of interaction between the sacred and the mundane, between the divine and the human? These questions lead us to a reflective pause. Around us, the night deepens, and the sounds of nature intensify. The murmur of the passing river seems to echo the voices of a distant past. What truths do we want to uncover? What shadows do we seek to illuminate? As the night deepens, it's essential to remember that the search for truth can be both a transformative and a challenging journey. The story of the Nephilim can be seen as a symbol of all that is mysterious and unknown in our lives. They remind us that there is much more to the world than meets the eye, an intertwining of stories, cultures, and experiences that form the tapestry of our existence. As you reflect on what you've learned, how about allowing yourself a moment of disconnection? Breathe deeply and feel the gravity of your body anchoring itself in reality. The touch of the earth beneath you is a reminder of your connection to the past, to those who came before us. Like the ancients, we too are searching for meaning, for a purpose that transcends our understanding. And in the darkness of the night, as the mysteries unfold, allow yourself to relax and let the questions float. Now, imagine yourself returning to the river valley, feeling the crispness of the night air. The stars continue to shine, and the full moon silently observes, as if wanting to share its secrets. The journey of the Nephilim may be forgotten by some, but the search for truth remains alive within each of us. The story unfolds, and you become a part of it, a seeker in a world full of enigmas and possibilities. The iniquity that had spread. What led to such a severe decision? The Nephilim, through their interactions with humanity, played a central role in this drama. The narrative suggests that their actions and teachings brought not only advancement, but also a profound deviation from divine paths. Moral corruption and growing violence became the norm, leading to the necessity of a new beginning, a fresh chance for humanity. Ancient accounts speak of Enoch, a righteous man who walked with God and was taken near him without experiencing death. His story, though brief, is shrouded in mystery and reverence. Enoch can be seen as a link between humans and the Nephilim, a testament that wisdom and righteousness were still possible in a world full of challenges. He had visions of heaven and glimpses of what was to come, including the approaching judgment. His message resonated through time, a warning about the dangers humanity faced by straying from the divine path. Eden, with all its charms and beauties, is often portrayed as a lost paradise. But what if the Nephilim also had their roots in this sacred place? The idea that these extraordinary beings could have resided nearby or even visited Eden adds a new layer to our understanding of humanity. The interaction between the divine and the human, between the sacred and the profane, could have shaped not only history, but also the beliefs that still echo in today's spiritual traditions. Suppose the Nephilim acted as messengers, or even intermediaries between God and humanity. They might have been sent to guide, teach, and protect, but instead they ended up becoming a source of discord. This understanding highlights the complexity of human nature and the struggle between good and evil, which is reflected in many cultures and religions. The stories about the Nephilim can be seen as a reflection of the internal struggles we all face, the battle between light and darkness that dwells within each of us. Many cultures and religions. The stories of the Nephilim can be seen as a reflection of the internal struggles we all face, the battle between the light and darkness that dwells within each of us. The vision of a world dominated by the Nephilim also evokes the image of an advanced civilization, where knowledge and technologies could have been far more sophisticated than we imagine. Megalithic structures found around the world, such as the pyramids and ancient temples, may be remnants of this legacy. The precision and grandeur of these constructions challenge the conventional narrative of human history. How could ordinary human beings, without modern tools and technologies, have accomplished such monumental feats? The theories surrounding these constructions often invoke the possibility that the Nephilim, with their superior knowledge, may have contributed to these achievements. Let us reflect on the implications of these stories. If the Nephilim truly existed and had a tangible presence on Earth, what would that mean for our understanding of human history? Many oral and written traditions around the world carry echoes of extraordinary beings who taught and guided civilizations, and the connection to the Nephilim could be a common thread uniting these narratives. The idea that humanity may have been influenced by forces beyond its comprehension can be disconcerting, but also fascinating. This leads us to question what truths are still hidden beneath the layers of time, waiting to be discovered. However, the presence of the Nephilim is also a reminder of the consequences that accompany power and knowledge. What began as a potentially beneficial interaction between divinities and humans quickly transformed into a spiral of corruption. What could have been an era of advancement and harmony became a struggle for survival amidst chaos. The flood, then, can be seen not merely as a punishment, but as a purification, an opportunity for humanity to start anew. What do we learn from this? Perhaps the underlying message is that even when surrounded by disorder, we still have the capacity to choose the path of righteousness and justice. In the serenity of the night, as you listen to the whisper of the leaves and the distant call of some nocturnal animal, it can be difficult not to wonder what else history conceals. The interconnection between Nephilim mythology and contemporary narratives suggests that the line between reality and legend may be thinner than we imagine. As you gaze at the stars above, you might feel the weight of unanswered questions and untold stories. In the quest to understand the Nephilim and their influence, we are challenged to reflect on our own path. What are the consequences of the choices we make in our own lives? How do we handle the knowledge we possess? The lessons from the past, even involving beings that may seem distant or mythical, still resonate in our daily lives. The challenge remains: how can we use what we learn to shape a better future? As the night deepens, the idea that the Nephilim are not just figures from a distant past, but perhaps reflections of the eternal struggles of the human condition, continues to deepen. And so, in this space of quietude, you are invited to allow these reflections to settle in your heart and mind. After all, what does it truly mean to be human in a world full of mysteries? And, as the story of the Nephilim teaches us, perhaps true power lies not only in strength or knowledge, but in the capacity to choose love, compassion, and justice, even in the face of adversity. The story of the Nephilim teaches us, perhaps true power resides not only in strength or knowledge, but in the ability to choose love, compassion, and justice, even in the face of adversity. The gentle breeze seems to whisper promises of new beginnings as you allow yourself to relax and let these thoughts dissolve into a state of peace. The mystery of the Nephilim, much like the history of humanity, remains open, waiting for each of us to find our own path amidst the world's complexity. With this, you can allow yourself to drift into sleep, carrying with you the lessons and mysteries of the night. The stones that make up their temples are so immense they defy contemporary logic. How did primitive human beings manage to move and sculpt blocks weighing hundreds of tons? Most archaeologists attribute these feats to collective human labor over generations, but there are those who believe that a superior force, perhaps even the Nephilim themselves, played a crucial role in this monumental construction. What is known is that these giants left indelible marks on the earth and on the history of humanity. As we walk through the valley where Baalbek stands, we can almost hear the echoes of voices that once vibrated among these stones.
The dust and the afternoon heat envelop us, and the air seems charged with mystery. We visualize the ancient workers, not just as ordinary men, but as part of a grand narrative, one that may even have been influenced by beings who were not entirely human. What unfolded here was more than a simple act of construction. It was a fusion of skills, knowledge, and perhaps even powers that eludes modern understanding. The accounts of the Nephilim, as previously mentioned, are found in ancient texts, including the Book of Enoch, which describes the Watchers, angels sent to observe the earth. However, they strayed from their mission and united with the daughters of men, resulting in a generation of giants. What might have motivated these celestial beings to transgress their orders? Curiosity? The desire for power? Or something even deeper? An innate connection with humanity that led them to seek an experience among mortals? These questions remain open, challenging our understanding of the divine and the human. History shows us that power corrupts and that a lack of limits can lead to devastating consequences. The Nephilim, with their superhuman abilities, were seen as gods by some and monsters by others. For many, they were a source of terror. Legends tell that as their influence grew, societies began to succumb to violence and a disregard for fundamental values. Ancient cities, once centers of culture and prosperity, became shadows of their former selves, devastated by impiety. In fact, ancient texts often emphasize that the presence of the Nephilim on Earth was related to a cycle of corruption and destruction. The flood, for example, is often interpreted as a divine response to the moral degeneration that gripped the world. The story of Noah and his ark is an account that reminds us that creation and destruction walk hand in hand. The Nephilim, through their actions, were catalysts in this process of degradation that led to the necessity of a new beginning. As we journey through history, it is fascinating to note how different cultures approach the question of giants and divine beings. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, gods who descended to Earth and interacted with humans. The similarity between these accounts suggests that, at some level, these stories reflect a shared knowledge, a common understanding of the presence of powerful beings who influenced humanity. What is even more intriguing is that these narratives, spread across such distinct cultures, seem to tell the same story of a past that was monumental, yet is often relegated to the realm of mythology. In the face of such evidence, many begin to wonder if the Nephilim truly existed or if they are mere creations of our collective imagination. Archaeologists have come across structures that do not fit into traditional narratives of human history, such as the pyramids and the mystical constructions at Pumapunku, where stone blocks fit together so perfectly that they defy conventional logic. How did these civilizations develop such advanced techniques? What we do know is that even if we cannot prove the existence of the Nephilim, their stories remain deeply embedded in our psyche.
As we delve deeper into this enigma, we are forced to consider that history may be far more complex than we have been taught. The conceptions of gods, giants, and superior beings may be interpretations of ancient knowledge, a collective memory of events that shaped not only the earth, but the very essence of humanity. The possibility that there are forces beyond our comprehension influencing our lives is not merely intriguing. It is a possibility that resonates within our very being. Returning to Baalbek, the grandeur of the stones makes us reflect on what we truly know about humanity and its place in the cosmos. We need to look at these structures not merely as monuments, but as testaments to a time when the boundaries between the human and the divine were more fluid. What do these constructions tell us about our capacity to create and destroy? What truly happened in these ancient lands that still reverberate with secrets? As night approaches and the stars begin to shine in the dark sky, we realize that the truth about the Nephilim may never be fully revealed. However, the journey to understand this mystery continues to fascinate us and inspire us to seek what is hidden. Allow yourself to feel the curiosity pulsating within you as we delve deeper into the shadows of the past. What do the Nephilim truly represent? Giants, or merely a metaphor for the challenges we face in our own time? The answers may be as distant as the constellations we now observe, but the search for them is part of our own narrative. And so, enveloped by this enchantment, we move forward, always in search of more answers, more stories, and more mysteries. V7, we observe them, but the search for them is part of our own narrative. And so, enveloped by this enchantment, we move forward, always in pursuit of more answers, more stories, and more mysteries. The Nephilim, with their deep roots in the Eden narrative, invite us to explore a fascinating dimension of mythology and theology. Let us imagine for a moment the palm trees swaying gently in the wind, the crystalline waters of a river winding through the fertile land, while celestial beings observe God's creation. Eden was not merely a physical space, but a state of purity, a place where the connection between the human and the divine was palpable. But what if, among the fruit-bearing trees and vibrant flowers, the Nephilim had found a temporary home, a sanctuary for their interactions with humanity? Their presence in Eden could have ushered in a new era of knowledge and wisdom. Let us imagine the Nephilim sharing secrets of the cosmos with Adam and Eve, teaching them about the stars, about medicine, and about the arts. This exchange could have been seen as a divine gift, an opportunity for humanity to evolve and prosper under the guidance of beings who transcend human understanding. However, like many stories of power, this one too could have a dark side. The same knowledge that could elevate humanity could also lead to its downfall. When we speak of the Nephilim, it is impossible not to consider the impact of their actions. Tradition suggests that, instead of exercising their influence benevolently, many of them chose to deviate from the original purpose of guiding humanity. This choice to opt for power and domination over guidance and protection can be seen as a reflection of human nature, ambition. As the Nephilim became more involved in their interactions with humans, they may have lost sight of their true mission, leading humanity down a path of corruption and disobedience. The transition from Eden to a corrupted earth is a recurring theme in the stories of many cultures. It serves as a warning about how knowledge, when abused, can have devastating consequences. The Nephilim, with their abilities and wisdom, could have become a coercive force, manipulating humanity to fulfill their own desires. The biblical narrative speaks of giants, not just in stature, but in influence and power. The idea that these entities could have transformed Eden from a paradise into a battleground between humans and spiritual forces is both intriguing and terrifying. Understanding the dynamic between the Nephilim and humans is essential to unraveling the complexity of the narratives that surround us. We can imagine a moment when Adam and Eve, surrounded by the beauty of Eden, are approached by one of the Watchers, perhaps Semyaza, who offers wisdom in exchange for adoration. This interaction could have changed the fate of generations. The knowledge they brought could have been revealing but also destructive. This moral dilemma is reflected in many myths and cautionary tales, where characters face difficult choices between what is right and what is desirable. The consequences of this alliance between the Nephilim and humanity may have been profound and lasting. As corruption spread, the divine nature of creation began to fade. Stories tell us that the Nephilim were not just giant beings. In many ways, they were a manifestation of humanity's internal struggle between light and darkness. Enoch, as the righteous man, emerges as a beacon of hope amidst a chaos. He walked with God and became a voice of warning, attempting to salvage what remained of the original purity. His story is a reminder that even in times of great corruption, there are still those who seek truth and righteousness. Eden, however, is more than just a geographical location. It is a spiritual state. The narrative suggests that even after the fall, the essence of Eden still lives within humanity. The struggle between following the divine path or yielding to the temptation of the Nephilim is a battle that unfolds within each of us. What the Nephilim teach us is that although we may be influenced by external forces, the final choice always resides within us. This choice is what shapes our destiny, both individually and collectively. As we reflect on the history of the Nephilim and their interactions with humanity, we are confronted with a fundamental question. What does it mean to be human? We have the capacity to create and destroy, to uplift and to debase. The suspicion that the Nephilim were, in a way, a reflection of our own flaws and weaknesses compels us to look within ourselves. The teachings offered to us can be both blessings and curses, and it is up to us to discern between what is truly good and what can lead to our ruin. As the narrative progresses, the echo of Enoch's story resonates in our hearts. His pursuit of justice and truth serves as a reminder that we must always strive to seek the light, even when surrounded by darkness. Eden may have been lost, but hope and the capacity for redemption remain. Each of us carries a part of Eden within us, a connection to the divine that can never be entirely erased. The Nephilim, then, are more than beings from ancient stories. They represent the dualities of human existence, light and darkness, good and evil, knowledge and ignorance. In their stories, we find not only the dangers of succumbing to temptation, but also the strength to resist and seek the truth. And so, as we explore what remains of this ancient narrative, we are invited to consider our own role in the continuation of this story. What will we do with the knowledge we possess? How will we choose to live our lives in a world still shaped by influences of forces beyond comprehension? These questions guide us on our journey, as we seek truth even amidst mystery and uncertainty. History shows us that power corrupts, and that a lack of limits can lead to devastating consequences. The Nephilim, with their superhuman abilities, were seen as gods by some and monsters by others. For many, they were a source of terror, while others revered them as sacred beings. This dualism in the perception of the Nephilim reveals much about human nature and the need to understand the unknown. The legends circulating about them are not just accounts of giants who walked the earth, but also reflections on morality, ambition, and the consequences of overstepping boundaries. The legends surrounding them are not just accounts of giants who walked the earth, but also reflections on morality, ambition, and the consequences of overstepping boundaries. As we revisit Baalbek, we envision the ceremonies held in its temples. Priests in long robes, faces deep in ritual, would cry for divine favor while crowds watched, fascinated and terrified. The Nephilim's connection to humans felt palpable, as if giants walked among them, not just as myths, but as real beings shaping daily lives. Local legends told of encounters, visions, and miracles from these extraordinary entities. How could such an advanced civilization arise without a greater influence? Stories of the Nephilim's abilities varied. Some claimed they could manipulate elements. Others believed they could heal. This wide array of attributed powers made them both fascinating and terrifying. The fear they evoked mirrored human vulnerability before the unknown. It was this fragility that drove people to seek answers through rituals, prayers, and sacrifices, hoping to appease these immense beings, who, in some way, molded their fate. As we walk through these ruins, the air grows denser, as if the stones themselves are imbued with memories. A gentle wind carries the distant echo of laughter and whispers. It is easy to imagine ancient voices of men and women blending with the wind's song, as they made offerings to the Nephilim, seeking protection and blessings. The ground beneath our feet seems to vibrate with history, as if the rocks guard secrets refusing to dissipate over time. But what truly happened when the Nephilim walked among humans? The Book of Enoch offers glimpses into an era where interactions between the two worlds were common. The narrative of the Watchers, who descended to Mount Hermon and chose wives from among the daughters of men, raises complex questions. Why were these beings, from a higher order, so interested in mingling with humanity? Was it a quest for understanding, a desire to experience mortal life, or a more sinister plan at play? The Nephilim, like humans, were ambivalent beings. Some were protectors, others oppressors. As their stories intertwined with surrounding civilizations, the line between sacred and profane blurred. Temples honoring them served not just worship, but control. Elites used reverence for these beings to consolidate power and influence. Faith became a tool, a weapon to unite or divide. Over time, Nephilim narratives grew more enigmatic. The deluge, believed by many as a divine response to the giants' corrupt acts, marked a separation between the Nephilim era and humanity. Yet even after this catastrophe, the stories persisted. What became of the Nephilims' remnants post-deluge? Did they survive, or did their lineages disperse among mortals? These questions echo in our hearts, challenging our understanding of history and power itself. These questions echo in our hearts, challenging our understanding of history and the very nature of power. As we reflect on these accounts, we realize that the Nephilim were not just figures from a distant past, but representations of dilemmas we still face today. The desire for power and control, the struggle between good and evil, and the quest for transcendence are universal themes intertwined with the narrative of the giants. Human nature is fertile ground for ambition and corruption, and the story of the Nephilim teaches us that these cycles can repeat if we are not vigilant. As we move away from Baalbek, the sunlight begins to set, painting the sky with warm, vibrant colors. The landscape around us seems to shift, as if time itself is unfolding. What once appeared to be a ruin now transforms into a symbol of a glorious and dark past, a reminder of the boundaries that were crossed and the consequences that arose. The echoes of the Nephilim still resonate, not only in the stones, but within each of us, in our own struggles and aspirations. The story of the Nephilim is both a warning and an inspiration. As we explore these mysteries, we are invited to reflect on what it means to be human, on the power we seek, and on the choices we make. What do we leave for future generations? What legacies do we build? And more importantly, how do we balance our desires with the responsibility that comes with knowledge? As these questions linger in our minds, night advances, and darkness becomes a comforting mantle, enveloping us in its reverent silence. Now, as we stand here in the quietness of the moment, let these reflections settle in our souls, like the stones that erected imposing temples. May the mysteries of the past guide us on our journeys, and may we find comfort in uncertainty, knowing that, like the Nephilim, we are part of a much larger narrative, one that transcends time and space. The wisdom of the ancients still lives within us, and it is this connection that compels us to continue exploring, questioning, and dreaming. The Nephilim, with their deep roots in the narrative of Eden, invite us to explore a fascinating dimension of mythology and theology. Let us imagine for a moment the palm trees swaying gently in the wind, the crystalline waters of a river winding through the fertile land, while celestial beings observe God's creation. Eden was not merely a physical space, but a state of purity, a place where the connection between the human and the divine was palpable. But what if, among the fruit trees and vibrant flowers, the Nephilim had found a temporary home, a sanctuary for their interactions with humanity? Their presence in Eden could have ushered in a new era of knowledge and wisdom. Imagine the Nephilim sharing secrets of the cosmos with Adam and Eve, teaching them about the stars, about medicine, and about the arts. This exchange could have been seen as a divine gift, an opportunity for humanity to evolve and prosper under the guidance of beings that transcend human understanding. However, like many stories of power, this too could have a darker side. The very knowledge that could elevate humanity could also lead to its downfall. When we speak of the Nephilim, it is impossible not to consider the impact of their actions. Tradition suggests that, instead of wielding their influence benevolently, many of them chose to deviate from the original purpose of guiding humanity. This choice to opt for power and domination at the expense of guidance and protection can be seen as a reflection of human nature, ambition. As the Nephilim became more involved in their interactions with humans, they may have lost sight of their true mission, leading humanity down a path of corruption and disobedience. The transition from Eden to a corrupted land is a recurring theme in the stories of many cultures. It serves as a warning about how knowledge, when abused, can have devastating consequences. History teaches us that power, when not accompanied by responsibility, can transform into tyranny. Thus, the presence of the Nephilim, once seen as a blessing, began to be perceived as a curse. What could have been a fruitful dialogue between worlds became a silent battle for control and influence. When we consider this narrative, we can imagine a scenario where Adam and Eve, upon receiving this powerful knowledge, began to question their own autonomy. What does it mean to be human in a world where superior beings walk among them? The curiosity that once led them to explore the garden now transformed into doubt and ambition. The Nephilim, instead of guides, became tempters, offering not just knowledge, but also power. Thus, the line between good and evil began to blur. The stories recount that the Nephilim brought with them not only wisdom, but also seduction. The entities that were meant to care for humanity became part of its weaknesses. The allure of power was irresistible. The seeds of a new era were being planted, but not without a price. Adam and Eve, by engaging with the Nephilim, began to realize that curiosity could lead to destruction. Eden, once a place of harmony, was becoming fertile ground for conflict and misunderstanding. Over time, the interactions between the Nephilim and humanity grew more complex. What began as a simple exchange of knowledge transformed into a game of manipulation, where human desires and the Nephilim's ambitions collided. It is possible that, in their pursuit of power, the Nephilim lost the ability to view humanity as equals. What was once a mentor-apprentice relationship became characterized by a distorted hierarchy, where the Nephilim saw humans as pawns on a chessboard rather than collaborators. As corruption spread, Eden began to transform. Vibrant flowers lost their luster, and the river's waters, once crystalline, became murky. The purity of the place was replaced by a sense of despair and rampant ambition. The Nephilim, instead of being the protectors of creation, became its destroyers, and the fall of Eden became inevitable. The way the Nephilim used their knowledge and power brought consequences that would resonate through generations. At this point, the narrative leads us to deep reflection on the nature of power and ambition. When power is allowed to overshadow responsibility, the consequences can be disastrous. What could have been a legacy of wisdom transformed into a cycle of destruction and suffering. Thus, the story of the Nephilim and Eden serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of balancing knowledge with ethics and morality. As the narrative unfolds, we are invited to consider what this means for us today. We live in a world where knowledge is within our reach, yet how we use it can shape our future. The legacy of the Nephilim teaches us that while knowledge can be a powerful tool, it must be wielded with consciousness. Eden, a symbol of harmony, was lost when the desire for knowledge and power surpassed wisdom and compassion. Ultimately, the story of the Nephilim is an invitation to reflection. How can we learn from their choices and avoid repeating the same mistakes? In a world filled with information and possibilities, true wisdom lies in knowing when to act and when to retreat. The balance between the desire for knowledge and the need to respect limits is essential to prevent us from losing our own essence. Given this narrative, we are led to understand that the immoderate pursuit of power can lead to the destruction of everything we hold dear. The Nephilim, who could have been our guides, became symbols of a path many would wish to avoid. Thus, the story of Eden and the Nephilim is more than a simple ancient narrative. It is a timeless lesson on human nature and the consequences of our choices. A gentle wind blows, carrying a whisper of forgotten stories. The stones of Baalbek, witnesses to a glorious past, seem to vibrate with the energy of events that unfolded there. As we walk among the ruins, it is as if we can hear the echoes of ancient priests' voices, the cries of reverence from a people who looked upon the Nephilim with a mixture of adoration and fear. The majestic columns, still standing despite time's passage, seem to guard profound secrets, secrets that go beyond human comprehension. Legends tell us that the Nephilim were beings of great stature, possessing strength and power that surpassed the capabilities of mortals. But what truly made them threatening was their connection to the divine. They were seen as intermediaries between humans and supernatural forces. It wasn't just their size that inspired awe, but the notion that they could, in the blink of an eye, alter people's destinies. Accounts spoke of a time when the Nephilim walked among mortals, interacting with communities and leaving indelible marks on the collective consciousness. Imagining those days leads us to reflect on the relationship between power and responsibility. The Nephilim, with their superhuman abilities, were revered, but they also bore the weight of immense expectations. When they used their gifts, they did so with a clear objective: to protect and guide. However, the line between protection and domination was thin. The fear that these immense beings could turn against humanity was a constant shadow in people's minds. Thus, while some sought to gain their favor through rituals and offerings, others wondered if it was prudent to trust such powerful beings, a constant shadow in people's spirits. Thus, while some sought to gain their favor through rituals and offerings, others wondered if it was wise to trust such powerful beings. Stories of encounters with the Nephilim were diverse and indeed fascinating. Some narratives spoke of miraculous healings, where human beings found themselves free from diseases that had afflicted them for years. Other accounts detailed individuals who, in moments of profound despair, cried out for assistance and were promptly answered. These compelling reports generated hope, but simultaneously created an environment of significant dependency. Local communities would gather in solemn rituals designed to guarantee the protection of the Nephilim, transforming everyday life into a cycle of constant adoration and deep-seated fear. Taking a moment to observe this specific site allows us to vividly imagine the ceremonies that once regularly took place among these sacred, towering columns. We can envision the flickering glow of torches reflecting upon the ancient, polished stones, the rich scent of incense mingling harmoniously with the crisp, fresh mountain air, and the deep, rhythmic beat of drums that powerfully resonated like an undeniable call to divinity. That collective sound was not merely noise, but a powerful symphony of profound reverence and eager expectation, where every single heart present pulsed with the exhilarating possibility of a direct contact with the supernatural realm. It truly was a moment when the very limits between the human and the divine became utterly blurred, and people genuinely felt themselves to be part of something immeasurably greater. However, this sacred connection had its dark side. For every story of healing, there was an account of loss. The Nephilim, with their power, could also bring destruction. In an instant, they could decide that humanity no longer deserved their protection. The fear of their wrath was palpable, and many wondered about the morality of trusting beings who held such control over the fate of mortals. This tension between worship and fear reflected the complexity of human nature and its interactions with the unknown. As we explore the monumental architecture of Baalbek, it's inevitable to ponder the construction of this place. How could a civilization erect such structures?
The size of the stones, some weighing thousands of tons, defies logic. Even with modern technologies, erecting such monuments would be a colossal feat. This question leads us to consider that, perhaps, the help of the Nephilim was not merely a matter of physical strength, but a mystical collaboration that transcended common understanding. The inhabitants of that time might have seen the Nephilim as guides, helping to shape not only the physical landscape, but also the spiritual. The tool marks found in the ruins reveal a skill that borders on the supernatural. Precise cuts and polished surfaces indicate a technical knowledge that, for many, seems impossible to achieve by ordinary human beings. This perception fuels the idea that there was something beyond simple human skill at play. The narratives surrounding these constructions revolve around a quest for truth, a truth that blends what is real and what is myth. The presence of the Nephilim in humanity's stories suggests that they were not merely isolated figures, but part of a grand narrative. They were, in a way, reflections of human aspirations and fears. Just as the Nephilim were seen as divine figures, humanity also seeks its own giants, those who can help them transcend the limitations of everyday existence. And in this act of seeking, we create our own stories, our own myths, and perhaps our own versions of the Nephilim, who continue to influence us in ways we are still learning to understand. As the sun begins to set behind the mountains, the soft twilight enfolds Baalbek in a magical aura. Shadows lengthen, and it's easy to imagine the rituals that once took place there, where the sacred and the mundane met. The echo of ancient voices still resonates, and the lessons they left become more evident. Power, when not tempered by wisdom, can lead to ruin. This message, intertwined in the legends about the Nephilim, invites us to reflect on the risks of seeking greatness without considering the consequences. As we move away from the ruins, a sense of reverence envelops us. It's a reminder that, however much we may try to understand the past, there will always be mysteries that remain. The legacy of the Nephilim is one of them, and the search for answers continues, alive like a flame that never goes out.
The transition from Eden to a corrupted land is a theme that echoes in many cultures around the world, reflecting a deep warning about the consequences of abusing knowledge. The Nephilim, initially seen as bearers of wisdom and power, may have become agents of corruption, leading humanity down a path of moral and spiritual decay. The story of Adam and Eve, with its choices and consequences, resonates as a distant echo of the interaction between the Nephilim and humans. Let us imagine, then, the moments that preceded the fall. Eden, with its exuberant beauty, was a garden where every leaf, every flower, and every fruit carried the essence of creation. However, this sacred space was also a battleground for opposing forces. The Nephilim, descendants of celestial beings, were drawn to this world, seduced by the fragility and curiosity of humans. They saw in Adam and Eve not just creatures made in God's image, but also an opportunity to exert their influence. As interactions intensified, the wisdom the Nephilim shared began to come at a cost. Knowledge of metallurgy, advanced agriculture, and occult sciences was offered in exchange for worship, for recognition. Humans, fascinated by these new abilities, began to stray from the divine purpose that had created them. The desire for power grew, as did the ambition to equal the beings who guided them, leading to a complex relationship that became increasingly toxic. The dynamic between Nephilim and humans transformed. What began as an exchange of knowledge evolved into a relationship of domination. The Nephilim, instead of being benevolent guides, became tyrants, manipulating human emotions and wills. Humanity, in its quest for power and understanding, began to act against God's precepts, ignoring the warnings and guidance they had received. The result was a departure from Eden's original purity, a fall into an abyss of corruption. One of the stories surrounding the Nephilim is how they influenced the construction of cities and civilizations. With the help of this knowledge, human communities began to prosper, but at a cost. Cities became centers of idolatry and corruption, where humans worshiped the Nephilim as gods. This worship was not only a reflection of the Nephilim's influence, but also evidence of the human desire to rise above their condition, to become more than they were. Nephilim as gods.
This worship was not merely a reflection of the Nephilim's influence, but also evidence of humanity's desire to rise above its condition, to become more than they were. The cycle of ambition and fall intensified. What had started as an exchange of knowledge quickly turned into a game of power, and the line between the sacred and the profane became increasingly indistinct. As the Nephilim moved away from their true nature as guides, they began to be seen as gods and, in turn, started to demand reverence and sacrifices. This transformation not only distorted the relationship between humans and Nephilim, but also had a profound impact on the spirituality of humanity. Behind the walls of grandiose cities, corruption began to spread like a plague. Violence and impiety became commonplace, and the divine teachings were buried under layers of pride and ambition. The lessons that should have elevated humanity now dragged it into an abyss of despair. Disobedience spread rampant, and the relationship between the human and the divine grew increasingly tenuous. In this scenario of decadence, we are led to reflect on the choice of Adam and Eve. What could have been a path of enlightenment and growth transformed instead into a cycle of fall and destruction. Knowledge, which was once a divine gift, passed into being a curse. The Nephilim, initially perceived as bringers of light, turned into shadows that loomed over humanity, obscuring its understanding and its profound connection with the Creator. The narrative of the Nephilim teaches us about the perilous balance between knowledge and power. As humanity sought to understand and dominate the world around it, the celestial forces that initially wished to guide it instead became figures of oppression. This transformation not only altered the spiritual landscape of the era, but also left a legacy that would deeply resonate through generations. Eden, a place of peace and purity, became enveloped in a cloud of despair and betrayal. The Nephilim, with their seductive promises, succeeded in diverting the course of creation, leading humanity toward a somber destiny. As we reflect upon this history, we are called to contemplate what it truly means to know and what we are meant to do with that knowledge. At this point in our narrative, it is important to remember that the story of the Nephilim and Eden is not just an ancient fable. It serves as a timeless reminder about the choices we make and the far-reaching consequences they bring. The relationship between the human and the divine is delicate and must always be treated with reverence and respect. After all, knowledge is a powerful tool, capable of building or destroying, depending on how we ultimately decide to use it. As we conclude this chapter, we are left with questions that echo in the depths of our own existence. How do we choose to use our knowledge? Are we truly following a path of light? Or are we allowing ourselves to be led astray by the shadows of ambition and corruption? The history of the Nephilim is an urgent invitation to reflect deeply on our own journey and on the vital search for balance between what we know and what we should responsibly do with that understanding. For, in the end, true wisdom lies in understanding that power must always be accompanied by responsibility, and that the pursuit of knowledge should be guided by love and genuine goodness. No, because ultimately, true wisdom lies in understanding that power must always be accompanied by responsibility, and that the pursuit of knowledge should be guided by love and goodness. In those times, reports of encounters with the Nephilim spread like wildfire across dry fields. Each story carried a mix of awe and respect. There were those who spoke of the giants as benevolent figures, beings who descended from the mountains and offered wise counsel, while others saw them as threats, capable of sowing destruction in the blink of an eye. The tribes, gathered around their campfires, shared their experiences, and every word seemed to carry the weight of both adoration and fear. A young man named Kael, from the tribe that inhabited the river valley, always listened carefully to the stories told by the elders. He was fascinated by the idea that such powerful beings could exist. Since childhood, he had dreamed of encountering a Nephilim. He imagined what he would say, how he would introduce himself to such a magnificent entity.
For Kyle, the Nephilim were not just legends. They were part of his reality, a constant presence in the collective imagination of his people. One night, during the full moon, while the others slept, Kyle set out in search of adventure. He walked to the riverbanks, where the water reflected the moon's silver glow. The atmosphere was charged with mystery, and the wind whispered among the trees. Kale felt drawn by an invisible force, as if something were calling him. He ventured further, leaving behind the comfort of his tribe, feeling progressively closer to an unknown destiny. Upon reaching a clearing, Kale saw an immense figure standing out against the starry sky. His heart pounded, and his breathing grew heavy. It was a Nephilim, exactly as the stories described. Tall and majestic, with an aura of power and grace, the being seemed almost ethereal. Kale stood paralyzed, unable to decide whether to approach or flee. However, curiosity won. He took a step forward, and the Nephilim turned slowly, its eyes shining like stars. "You must not fear, young one," said the Nephilim with a deep and resonant voice. "I am Merin, and I come seeking a pure heart, someone who believes in hope and light." The words echoed in the clearing, bringing a sense of peace to Kale's anxious spirit. He could not believe what he heard. Merin was not just a giant, he was someone who knew the frailties and fears of mortals. Kale introduced himself, trembling with emotion. "My name is Kale. I always believed that the Nephilim were more than just stories. I always believed that we could be guided by you." Merin smiled, and the giant's expression was a mix of friendship and compassion. "You are courageous, Kale. Many fear the unknown and turn away from what they do not understand. But you sought the truth, and for that you shall be rewarded." The Nephilim began to speak of ancient times, when humans and divine beings coexisted in harmony. He described how the Nephilim were created to protect the earth, but also to teach mortals about balance and responsibility. Kale listened intently, absorbing every word as if it were a treasure. Merin was there to restore the lost connection between humans and the forces that had always surrounded them, and this lit a flame of hope in the young man's heart. "But times have changed," Merin continued, his voice now laden with sadness. "Humans have forgotten their roots, and many have turned away from the light. Greed and ambition have corrupted hearts, and now the world is in peril. My siblings and I need help, but we need mortals to remember what is truly important." Kale felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Merin's friendly demeanor contrasted with the gravity of his words, and he realized that the Nephilim were not just figures of worship, but also beings who needed support. "What can I do?" Kale asked, deciding he could not let this opportunity pass. "How can I help you?" Merin looked into Kale's eyes, and for a moment the young man felt as if he were looking into the universe itself. "Spread the message, bring hope to people's hearts, show them that light still exists, even in the darkness. And when the time comes, be prepared to be a guardian of knowledge. The Nephilim cannot do this alone. We need allies." With these words, something within Kale shifted. He realized his life would never be the same. The connection he had made with Merin was not just a fortuitous encounter, but a calling. He felt called to be a spokesperson, to carry the message not only to his tribe, but to all surrounding communities. From that encounter, he would become a defender of truth, a seeker of light in dark times. As the moon moved across the sky, Merin began to fade, like smoke in the wind. "Remember, Kale, true strength lies in unity and the courage to fight for what is right. The journey will be long, but do not give up. I will always be in search of those who believe." And with a final glint in his eyes, the Nephilim vanished into the darkness of the night. Kale returned to his tribe, his heart filled with determination. He knew the task awaiting him would not be easy. There would be skepticism, doubt, and resistance. However, the connection he had forged in the clearing strengthened him. He knew that the stories of the Nephilim needed to be told, that the truth needed to be revealed. and that he could never again ignore the responsibility he now carried. In the days that followed, Kale began to gather the members of his tribe, sharing his experiences and what he had learned. He told them about Marin and the need to remember the ancient teachings. He spoke with such fervor that even the most skeptical began to listen. Voices of support began to emerge, and Kale's story spread like an echo, traveling through valleys and forests, reaching distant communities. Thus, a new journey began. Kale would become not merely a storyteller, but a true leader, guiding his people back to a connection with the divine. He knew that the Nephilim could be more than legends, and that perhaps, with time, humanity could rediscover the strength that existed within its own heart. And so, with every step he took, he carried the weight of a legacy that was only just beginning to unfold. Over time, humanity could rediscover the strength that lay within its own heart. And so, with every step taken, it carried the weight of a legacy that was only just beginning to unfold. The transition from Eden to a corrupted land is a theme that echoes across many cultures worldwide, reflecting a profound warning about the consequences of abusing knowledge. The Nephilim, initially seen as bearers of wisdom and power, may have become agents of corruption, leading humanity down a path of moral and spiritual decay. The story of Adam and Eve, with their choices and consequences, resonates as a distant echo of the interaction between the Nephilim and humans. Let us imagine, then, the moments that preceded the fall. Eden, with its exuberant beauty, was a garden where every leaf, every flower, and every fruit carried the essence of creation. However, this sacred space was also a battlefield for opposing forces. The Nephilim, descendants of celestial beings, were drawn to this world, seduced by the fragility and curiosity of humans. They saw in Adam and Eve not merely creatures made in God's image, but also an opportunity to exert their influence. As interactions intensified, the wisdom the Nephilim shared began to come at a cost. Knowledge of metallurgy, advanced agriculture, and occult sciences was offered in exchange for worship, for recognition. Humans, fascinated by these new abilities, began to stray from the divine purpose that had created them. The desire for power grew, as did the ambition to emulate the beings who guided them, leading to a complex relationship that became increasingly toxic. The dynamic between Nephilim and humans was transforming. What began as an exchange of knowledge evolved into a relationship of domination. The Nephilim, instead of being benevolent guides, became tyrants, manipulating the emotions and wills of humans. Humanity, in its quest for power and understanding, began to act against God's precepts, ignoring the warnings and guidance they had received. The result was a gradual departure from eternal truths and a descent into an abyss of questionable morality. The seeds of corruption were planted, and the impact began to spread like a plague. Society, once united and in harmony with creation, began to fragment. Disputes over power and recognition became common. Humans began to worship the Nephilim, offering them sacrifices and tributes in search of favors. The innocence of Eden, once a refuge of peace and joy, was now a distant memory, eclipsed by boundless ambition. The Nephilim, perceiving the vulnerability and thirst for power of humans, intensified their influence. They began to foster rivalries and conflicts among tribes, thereby ensuring that humanity remained dependent on their wisdom and protection. Knowledge that was once a gift became a tool of control. With every teaching, every new skill, came an expectation, submission to the will of the Nephilim. The relationship became even more complex when the Nephilim began to intermingle with humans. Children of powerful lineages were born, inheriting both the grandeur of their celestial parents and human fragility. These children, the Nephilim, were seen as gods among men, revered for their supernatural abilities. The line between human and divine began to blur, and with it, morality became even more distorted. As the Nephilim established themselves as rulers, oppression began to take shape.
Those who opposed their authority were severely punished, and the populace, fearing the wrath of these powerful beings, silenced their voices. The freedom Adam and Eve experienced in Eden was a distant echo, and humanity found itself trapped in a web of control and fear. What once a dialogue between creator and creatures transformed into a monologue of domination and servitude. The Nephilim, in their quest for absolute power, lost sight of the purpose of their own existence. The teachings that were meant to elevate humanity now became weapons of destruction, used to keep humans in a state of subservience. Knowledge was no longer a bridge to divinity, but a barrier separating men from their creator. Meanwhile, at the heart of the corruption, a small spark of hope began to burn. Some humans, still in touch with divine truth, began to question the power structure imposed by the Nephilim. They gathered in secret, sharing stories and traditions that spoke of a time when humanity lived in harmony with creation, without the interference of the fallen beings. These small groups formed a core of resistance, ready to fight for their lost freedom. But the struggle was difficult. The Nephilim, with their strength and knowledge, were almost invincible. Every attempt at resistance was quickly crushed, and the dissidents realized that the battle was not only physical, but also spiritual. The influence of the Nephilim permeated minds and hearts, distorting the truth and making humans feel powerless. Doubt began to infiltrate their souls, questioning whether freedom was truly possible or if they were destined to serve. As chaos intensified, the need for a redeemer became more evident. The story of a figure who could rise against the Nephilim and restore lost harmony began to echo in hearts and minds. The concept of a savior spread among the tribes, a hope that, amidst the darkness, a light could finally shine. The Nephilim, aware that dissatisfaction was growing, began to act more tyrannically, further reinforcing their control and repression. They feared that humanity's awakening could be their downfall. However, in their arrogant desire for power, the Nephilim did not realize that the seeds of a new beginning were being planted, even amidst the corruption. The story of Eden was not completely lost. The fight for freedom and truth was just beginning, and future generations would have to face not only the Nephilim, but also the shadows growing within themselves. Humanity's journey was about to cross a point of no return, and the echo of the past would resonate in the decisions to come. The struggle for redemption would be intense and difficult, but the spark of hope, though small, never ceased to shine. "You must not fear, young one," said the Nephilim with a deep, soft voice that echoed through the clearing, making the leaves on the trees dance lightly, as if responding to his call. Kael, still paralyzed by the imposing presence of the being, felt a wave of calm invade his being. Amidst the fear, an overwhelming curiosity took hold of him. This was real. The Nephilim stood before him, and he did not want to miss the opportunity to understand that mystery. Invade his being. Amidst the fear, an overwhelming curiosity seized him. It was real. The Nephilim stood before him, and he didn't want to miss the chance to understand that mystery. "I am Merin, one of the children of Eden, sent to observe mortals. What brings you here, to this solemn place?" The Nephilim paused. Its enveloping presence made time stand still. Kael gathered his courage and replied, his voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to know if the stories about you are true." "If you really exist." Merin smiled, his expression blending wisdom with a touch of nostalgia. "Stories are always a mix of truth and fantasy. The Nephilim were created in ancient times, before many of your ancestors walked this earth. We are beings of great power, and so, for many centuries, we were seen as gods or monsters, depending on the perspective of whoever narrated the events." Kael listened intently, each word a thread weaving a new understanding of his world. "But why are you here now? What happened to the others?" he asked, eager for more answers. The Nephilim gazed at the horizon, as if seeing beyond what lay before it. "Times have changed, little Kael. Humanity has strayed from its true essence.
The Nephilim became a distant memory, an echo of a glorious past, now merely a whisper in legends. "So, you no longer have power over us?" Kyle inquired, a mixture of hope and doubt in his voice. Merrin inclined his head, reflecting. Power is not measured only by physical strength, but by influence over people's hearts and minds. When the Nephilim left the earth, many of their blessings and teachings were lost. But there are still those who seek truth in the shadows, and they can remember the lost teachings. The conversation became a flow of questions and answers, where Kyle felt an increasing connection. He wished to understand more about the hidden truths of Eden, about how the Nephilim, ancient guardians of knowledge and wisdom, became mythical figures. "But why did this happen? Why didn't you return to guide us?" Kyle questioned, with a sincerity that shone in his eyes. Merrin looked deeply into the young man's eyes. "We cannot interfere directly with the evolution of human souls. Free will is sacred. However, there has always been a desire to reconnect with those willing to listen and learn. We are the shadows of the trees you see, the whispers of the wind you feel. We are here, but in ways you may not fully comprehend." Kyle reflected on this. Merrin's words resonated within him, making him ponder the essence of his tribe's traditions. He recalled the stories he had heard about ancient rituals, about how his ancestors sought wisdom in the silence of nature and the starry nights. It was a path that many had abandoned, but which still pulsed in his heart. "How can I know if the stories about you and the other Nephilim are true? How can I understand the paths that were lost?" Kyle asked, feeling a growing determination.
The Nephilim smiled again, and its eyes glowed with the light of the stars. "The answer is not in words, but in experience. You must seek the truth for yourself. With every step you take towards the unknown, you will discover not only the secrets of Eden, but also the secrets that lie within you." The young man felt a wave of emotion, as if Merrin were offering him the key to a deep and personal mystery. He realized that the journey he had always desired was just beginning. It wasn't just about finding the Nephilim, but about rediscovering himself and the world around him. "What if I get lost along the way?" he questioned, his insecurity showing in his voice. "Getting lost is part of the process of finding yourself, Kyle. Do not fear the darkness, for it is in the absence of light that you will be able to see the brightest stars. Remember that truth is not a destination, but a journey. And each of us, in our quest, must face our own demons and uncertainties." Merrin's words echoed in Kyle's mind, and he began to understand that his search for answers was also a search for meaning. The Nephilim leaned in, as if preparing to leave. "Remember, I will always be near, even if I cannot be seen. The connection between our worlds is stronger than you imagine." Kyle felt a mix of sadness and gratitude as Merrin disappeared into the moonlight, leaving him alone in the clearing. The young man stood there for a moment, reflecting on the depth of that experience. He felt the soft breeze caress his face, as if Eden itself were applauding his courage. That night, as he returned to his tribe, Kyle carried not only the stories of the Nephilim, but also a new understanding of himself and the world around him. He knew his journey was just beginning, and that from that moment on, every step he took would be guided by the light he had found in that clearing. A light that not only illuminated the path ahead, but also revealed the truths hidden within him. He looked up at the starry sky, feeling that the stars were not just distant lights, but beacons of hope and wisdom. Kyle realized that in seeking the Nephilim, he had, in fact, found himself. And this revelation filled him with a sense of peace. The journey was far from over. It was just beginning, and he was ready to face the challenges to come, armed with the wisdom of the ancients and a heart open to the unknown. The transition from Eden to a corrupted land is a theme that echoes in many cultures around the world, reflecting a profound warning about the consequences of abusing knowledge. The Nephilim, initially seen as bearers of wisdom and power, may have become agents of corruption, leading humanity down a path of moral and spiritual decay. The story of Adam and Eve, with their choices and consequences, resonates as a distant echo of the interaction between the Nephilim and humans. Let us imagine, then, the moments that preceded the fall. Eden, with its exuberant beauty, was a garden where every leaf, every flower, and every fruit carried the essence of creation. However, this sacred space was also a battlefield for opposing forces. The Nephilim, descendants of celestial beings, were drawn to this world, seduced by the fragility and curiosity of humans. They saw in Adam and Eve not just creatures made in God's image, but also an opportunity to exert their influence. In this world, seduced by human fragility and curiosity, they saw in Adam and Eve not merely creatures made in God's image, but also an opportunity to exert their influence. As interactions intensified, the wisdom shared by the Nephilim began to come with a price. Knowledge of metallurgy, advanced agriculture, and occult sciences was offered in exchange for worship and recognition. Humans, fascinated by these new abilities, began to stray from the divine purpose for which they had been created. The desire for power grew, as did the ambition to equal the beings who guided them, leading to a complex relationship that became increasingly toxic. The dynamic between Nephilim and humans transformed. What began as an exchange of knowledge evolved into a relationship of domination. The Nephilim, instead of benevolent guides, became tyrants, manipulating human emotions and wills. Humanity, in its quest for power and understanding, began to act against God's precepts, ignoring the warnings and guidance they had received. The result was a gradual departure from divine values and a growing moral degradation. The temptation that enveloped humanity was not merely about the forbidden fruit, but about what that fruit represented: the desire to ascend to the Nephilim's level.
With the constant intervention and influence of these beings, people began to seek ways to become like them, believing that true power resided in the knowledge they were acquiring. This seduction was like a venom that infiltrated the veins of society, corrupting hearts and minds. The Nephilim, sensing human vulnerability, began to exploit this ambition. They were not mere observers, they were active participants in the deterioration of morality. They offered teachings that, while appearing beneficial, carried devastating consequences. Metallurgy, for instance, brought the ability to forge weapons, facilitating violence and war. Advanced agriculture led to the accumulation of wealth, generating inequality and jealousy among tribes. Occult knowledge began to be used to manipulate and control, creating cults and practices that increasingly strayed from the worship of the Creator. Over time, relationships among humans became as distorted as their interactions with the Nephilim. Communities, which once lived in harmony, were divided into factions, each vying for power and influence. Worship of these beings, once spontaneous and genuine, transformed into dark rituals where sacrifices were offered in exchange for favors and power. Morality, once anchored in a connection with the divine, was replaced by an ethics of power and domination. The Nephilim, now seen as gods or demigods, stood at the center of this new order. Their presence was revered, but also feared. Many human leaders began to proclaim themselves representatives of the Nephilim, asserting that their power came directly from these beings' blessings. This manipulation only deepened the corruption, as those seeking control used the people's fear and admiration to consolidate their dominion. Faith in God, which once provided a solid foundation for morality and justice, was gradually replaced by a faith in the strength and authority of the Nephilim. Amidst this growing darkness, there were still those who remembered the original purpose of creation. Small groups of humans, preserving ancient traditions, tried to reverse the corruption, seeking a true connection with the Creator. They met in secret, sharing stories about Eden and the purity of the relationship humans were meant to have with God. These gatherings were a reminder of what had been lost and of the hope that one day the light would return. The Nephilim, sensing the resistance, intensified their vigilance. Those who opposed their influence were persecuted, often severely punished. The duality of the human being, the capacity to seek both good and evil, was in fierce conflict. Every act of rebellion against the Nephilim and the system they had established was a step towards freedom, but also an invitation to danger. The war between light and darkness was not just a physical battle, but a struggle for the soul of humanity. As knowledge became increasingly distorted, the line between good and evil grew indistinct. Humanity, initially created to live in harmony with creation, was now trapped in a vicious cycle of self-destruction. What should have been a journey of learning and growth transformed into a desperate quest for power and recognition, leading to the ruin of both humans and the Nephilim. Thus, the story of Adam and Eve and their interaction with the Nephilim teaches us that knowledge, when misused, can become a weapon. The fall from Eden was not just the loss of a physical space, but a symbol of the loss of values, of the connection with the divine. What began as a gift of wisdom and power transformed into a burden, a reminder that every choice has its consequences, and that true strength lies in humility and the pursuit of light, not in domination and control. Maren looked into Kayal's eyes, her gaze as deep as an abyss carrying centuries of knowledge and pain. Although physical strength has diminished, the essence of the Nephilim remains. We are connected to the earth, to the sky, and to what many have forgotten, the magic that flows through all creatures and elements. True strength lies in harmony with nature and in the wisdom of understanding what is beyond the visible. Kayal felt a shiver run down his spine. He had only dreamed of hearing such words, which touched something deep in his heart. But why do the legends speak of us as if we were mere shadows of the past? Why are humans so afraid of you? The question emerged as a whisper, laden with curiosity and fear. Maren breathed deeply, and as she exhaled, the air around them seemed to thicken, as if ancestral memories coalesced around them. Humans fear what they do not understand. When the Nephilim walked among you, we brought both light and shadow.
Power has a price, and many were seduced by it, forgetting that true dominion comes from unity, not subjugation. Humans distanced themselves from their ties to creation, and this generated distortions and fears. And many allowed themselves to be seduced by it, forgetting that true domination comes from unity, not subjugation. Humans distanced themselves from their ties with creation, and this generated distortions and fears. So, you mean humanity's fear is a result of a disconnection? Kayal asked, absorbing the Nephilim's words. Maren nodded slowly, his expression serious. Yes, and it is this disconnection that leads us to live in separate worlds. In ancient times, we knew each of you by name. We were friends and allies. Now we are merely figures and stories, often distorted by those who do not know the truth. The young man felt a wave of sadness upon hearing this. But how can we restore this bond? How can we become one again? The hope in his voice was a flame beginning to glow. Maren looked up at the sky, where stars were starting to appear, like small lanterns lit in the vastness of the night. The path back is long, and demands courage and compassion. You need to remember who you are, and what truly matters. Through connection with nature, with others, and with yourselves, you can rekindle the flame of knowledge. But it is also necessary to confront the fears sown in your hearts, to face the shadows that dwell within you and in the world around you. This is the true journey of mortals. Kayal reflected on those words. He had always felt there was something more beyond what was seen, a deeper connection among all beings. I want to do this. I want to be part of the change. But how can I begin? He asked with determination. Maren smiled again, and his smile illuminated the surrounding darkness. Change begins with a single step. Your intention to seek the truth is already a great advance. Do not underestimate the power of the collective.
Others share your concerns, and together you can create a movement. Small actions like caring for the earth, respecting animals, and seeking peace among people are fundamental. Every choice you make echoes beyond the present moment. The Nephilim looked once more at the horizon, his majestic form illuminated by the light of the crescent moon. Remember, Kael, what is lost can be found again, but what has been forgotten needs to be remembered with love and patience.
And be aware, whenever you question reality, whenever you seek what is hidden, the echoes of the Nephilim will be by your side, guiding you even in the darkest hours. Kael felt a wave of gratitude flood his being. The connection he had established with Meren was something beyond the physical. It was a communion of souls that transcended time. He knew he was no longer alone in his quest for understanding and truth. With every beat of his heart, he felt the presence of the ancients, those who came before him and were now willing to guide him. The night advanced, and the stars seemed to shine with greater intensity as Meren prepared to depart. My time here is limited, but you can always call me through your thoughts. The quest for knowledge never ends, and the Nephilim will always be present for those who have the courage to look beyond the veil of reality. With these words, Meren began to fade, his form dissolving into a soft light that illuminated the clearing. Kael reached out his hand, but there was nothing left to hold. However, a new certainty had been born within him. He stood up, feeling the earth's energy pulse beneath his feet, the connection to everything around him growing stronger. Nothing left to hold on to. Yet, a new certainty had been born within him. He stood up, feeling the earth's energy pulse beneath his feet, the connection with everything around him growing stronger. Looking around, Kael noticed that the trees seemed more alive, the leaves whispered secrets, and the stars shone with an intensity he had never observed before. He was more aware of the world around him, as if a new layer of reality had been unveiled. "I will remember," he whispered to himself, filled with the determination to move forward. "I will remember the Nephilim, the wisdom they brought, and the importance of keeping that connection alive. No matter how distant they may be, I will strive to restore what was lost." Love and compassion are the keys that will open the door to a future where humans and Nephilim can coexist once more. With a light heart and an open mind, Kael began his journey back, not merely as a mortal, but as a bearer of truth. He knew the path would be filled with challenges, but something guided him now, the memory of the Nephilim and the certainty that true strength lies in unity and understanding. And so, he walked beneath the starlight, ready to face the world, one step at a time, never forgetting the teachings imparted to him on that magical night.